This is Scott McDonald with DrDemographics.com. And today we're going to talk, as we do in our podcasts, about the perfect place to put a practice. The fact is, from time to time, I will recommend different keywords or factors when you're determining where you want to go. Today, it's about longevity. Now, you may say longevity is a weird way to think about practice locations. Growth has been one of the things. Affluence has been another. High educational attainment scores. I've changed the topic from time to time, but right now I want to talk to you about why longevity happens to be one of the more important terms about where to put a practice. This is not unusual when it comes to a time in which inflation is out of control. And from what I can tell, inflation is out of control. It's not out of control everywhere, and it's going to be a more important factor to consider for some types of practices than others. But I'm going to say longevity is vital, it's important, and you want to find locations in which you can have longevity in practice, and it's becoming an increasingly important factor as you choose where to go. So please stick with me. Now, longevity is an important factor during a time of inflation for several reasons. Yes, it would be highly desirable for a person to be able to take a minimum amount of risk and a short period of time and say that's going to be the ideal place for us to go. But a few factors that I want you to keep in mind. One is that during a time of inflation, rapid growth, at least over a large geographic area, is not really happening. People get very cautious. And as interest rates increase, you have to manage that risk because your physical assets, your things, your stuff, and your money and your credit are all of a sudden at risk in a way that when there was not this going on, it wasn't happening. Now, maybe it's my age, maybe it's my grandchildren. It could be the death of a close friend who I miss very much. But today, the demographic term that matters most is longevity. So as you're evaluating sites, I want you to think in terms of what longevity means to the practice success. Now, does practice and career longevity really matter? You have to remember, I started this business back in the 1980s, and we were looking at practices throughout the United States, state by state, major county by county. And we were looking at competition ratios, investments, risk, credit, different things. And each time I looked at those factors, I would see them kind of jockeying for position for which was most important as an aspect of where to put a practice. So please stick with me. I think you'll find this rather interesting. Now, does practice and career longevity really matter? Wouldn't it be better to be young and healthy and make just a killing in a very short period of time? Yeah, it would be great, but those opportunities are a little bit frightening because of the amount of risk. Now, we have survived, or we have to survive through this inflation cycle. Experts are telling me that with the invasion of the Ukraine, world political instability and military risk, the price of fuel is going to go up dramatically. Dramatically. Now, this is not a webinar podcast about energy. It's about getting into a practice and sustaining that practice through the time necessary to be able to pay off loans and have the profitability of the practice become realized. We have to survive through this inflation cycle. Now, how long is it going to last? Well, as I've looked at inflation cycles in the past, you usually have a hard year, maybe 3/4 of a year in which it gets really bad. And then we're in a recovery period. That seems to be the normal pattern. I don't know how long this is going to be because there are several factors that are affecting the job market, employment, the pandemic, for example, and the risks of getting into a property. Right now, I'm a little worried about getting into urban areas. The amount of risk that landlords and building owners want us to undertake with practices is high. And in fact, urban areas are very expensive. So I'm just saying, We got to be serious about it. Can we survive through this inflation cycle? The answer is, of course, you can. Absolutely. However, what you have to look for in the locations that you're considering may not be the same today as they were last month or last year. I am looking for doctors to play the long game. Now, I'm not saying that you can't make a killing. I'm just going to say that is really not the way I'm recommending my clients go. I'm going to be talking about this. I've been asked to speak for ADS, the practice brokerage firm. We're going to be talking about some national trends that are happening. Some are time sensitive, some are geographically sensitive. And I want to thank ADS for inviting me to speak. I'm doing a lot more sales conferences than I have done before. One of the reasons is this long game. I want people to understand what their risks are associated with geography and demographics. Most people who are demographers will simply put the word out, oh, this is what the demographics of the area are, but they're not thinking about the long-term implications of the demographic impact upon an investment in a practice. Now, your investment in practice is going to take time. I think that is truer now than it was even last year. So we have to consider the length of time to pay off your debt, practice purchase, for example, or a startup, to be able to recover or realize the profits, your investment, in other words. When it happens, I think you'll be surprised how fast it happens, but at least for a while, there's risk, and time is one of those factors that will determine the risk that you ought to take. I hope you're following me. The quick kill and overnight success carries a lot of risk. And I know a lot of doctors were saying, oh, well, our new practice model is so fantastic. We're just going to make money and money. Oh, gosh, hand over fist. I would rather have you consider value of the properties you're considering, whether it's a lease or a purchase of the property, or a practice that's existent, or if you want to go with a de novo practice. This is not a simple matter. And I'm just kind of saying anybody who thinks they're going to get rich quick had better realize that there's a trade-off, and that is how much risk you're undertaking. Now, this is going to require some research, some patience, and solid strategy to find locations that are going to return a strong investment. It is more than just a matter of growth. So, yeah, you can always go online and say, how much growth is there in the area? And you'll say growth is good. Generally speaking, that's true. However, there is risk associated with rapid growth, because very often the people who are moving into an area and the business development around the site may not be quite what you expect. So therefore, you got to do some serious research to say, is this going to pay off well? Now, I love the people who develop new practices. I think they're wonderful. But it takes a certain amount of patience and discipline in order to make this happen. And it doesn't happen by accident. So what I'm saying is a solid strategy of growth and practice promotion and mature management are what is necessary for this to pay off well. Do I believe that doctors need to own their own practices? Absolutely. That's the only way to wealth. And particularly in times of inflation, that's the safe way to bet. Solid investing in property, real value, is what's called for. I think we have to put away speculation a little bit in favor of that which is going to return a solid benefit to you. Now, you may think I'm talking about investing. Yes, investing is important, but I'm a demographer. So I consider that finding locations that are going to pay off well in the long term requires you to do some research to show not only how much growth there is, but the nature of the growth and the people who are in an area. Now, clinical healthcare, providing services, diagnosis, and treatment, requires you to understand something about the demographics of the people. It's not just, are they rich? Is the value of their home increasing? Is the population fundamentals there so that there are going to be more and more people to serve as a patient base? Sometimes the answers are yes, sometimes no. And therefore, I have to ask you to consider something regarding the longevity of your practice. You have to be able to walk away from a practice area that is not going to pay off for you. There sometimes the business, and this is Dave Moe, my old mentor. He said the best business you do is the business that you do not do. You need to be able to walk away when longevity is not going to be a factor and the value of the practice site and the area is not going to increase or benefit you. I can't tell you how important this is, but well, some people just want to feel happy and happy go lucky. I love them, but there's risk. Now, your practice must have real growth based on people. So, yes, I want the number of patients in an area or potential patients to increase. I want the population to be on the upswing. If it is less than 1% per year, I want you to have a very good reason why this is a good risk for you. Now, if I give you the statistics and I say this is not going to be a good place, I want you to take that seriously. I'm not trying to make money on your pain. What I'm trying to do is to give you good research so that you can make really a wise choice. And that is really going to be a fundamental understanding of longevity in practice. The quality of life. Now listen carefully, because most people think, oh, I just want no competition. Yeah, well, I get that. But the reality is the quality of your life is going to have to matter increasingly. In short, you're going to have to like the place that you're working and like the place that you're living as they relate together. The quality of life, at least over the next 3 or 4 years, is going to matter. You've got to have something that makes you happy to get up and go to work, and the risks associated with that site, like the quality of life, are going to be a little dependent upon the demography of the area. Now, I want to go into this thing on 3 points of the quality of life. It's going to matter, and it's going to matter more and more, in fact, as the time goes by. Value moves. In other words, that you're moving from one site to another have to meet certain criteria. It should have a shorter, not a longer commute. So a lot of people say, oh, I can travel half an hour, 45 minutes to get to the office. At a time in which the price of energy is going up dramatically, you and your staff can't afford a very long commute. Time is not on your side, but neither is money when it comes to expensive locations. Now, this is going to sound kind of dumb because it isn't really, hardcore business, but I want you to move closer to family and your support network. I am feeling, and as I've researched locations, the smart moves are to find places that are closer to home and closer to family, closer to people who you love and who depend on you. Therefore, it is not a good idea to have a long commute, but it is a very good idea to be closer to the people who are going to be dependent upon you and will serve as your patient base. So that's why when we're doing research on locations, I'm going to ask you, how do you describe how far away your core patient base is? Now, this is also going to sound like it's not very scientific, but recreation counts. I want you to genuinely like the place you're in. Now, I happen to live in Utah, and I'm not a native Utahn. I'm from California. But we have found that by taking a hike, by taking a weekend off, by being somewhere close to what you like to do, you're in a better position. And this is a value move. The other thing is, there are some places that you like the population. You like the people who live there. You like the people who work there. And you relate to them not only demographically, but psychographically. You may want to look that up on Wikipedia, what I mean by psychographics. Now, the other thing which surprises me as my research goes on is weather is a choice. There are some people who are just miserable all year long. And in fact, I've talked to a lot of doctors who are just saying, I can't stand the weather. It's too hot, it's too cold, too much rain, too little snow, whatever. But weather is a choice, and you can understand why one location is going to be helpful to you and your lifestyle and your quality of life than another. Now, the last one is culture. It may surprise you to know, but there are good reasons why some locations are going to suit you better. Now, I live within an area, I myself, where I've got 2 major universities close by. Both of them have great fine arts. And I like the performing arts, music and drama, dance. I like that a lot. And I'm finding the amount of time that we're spending with these university settings is great. But Culture also counts in terms of crime. Now, there are two kinds of crime: crimes against people and crimes against property. We're finding that is a part of the culture imperative. If there's a lot of crime going on and it's on the upswing, you're in a bad place. And there are some places that I have done research to say how much of what kind of crime is going to affect this area and the patient base. And the patient bases are becoming more and more sensitized to cultural issues and crime. Roots matter. So, in other words, if you've got a group of people who are, well, for want of a better word, your people, however you define that, that's good. There are some places that is not happening. Do I believe that you are a slave to the culture that you were raised in, your race and your ethnicity? No. But I do believe, however, that they represent an imperative that you need to keep track of. It matters, in other words. Now, this is going to surprise you a little bit. I believe that family is a verb. The bottom line is, if you're close to a support network, and that's how I'm defining family, you're in a much better position to see your sister who you haven't been close to in a long time, or your friends, or your church congregation. Family is a verb, and it is going to make you happier or sadder based upon the relative position of that population to your practice and your living condition. Now, there is another question I have. Actually, it's two questions, as you'll see. Where can you keep practicing for a long time? There used to be a time in which you would consider going into practice for maybe 5 or at most 10 years. Well, that's great. But in order to have you realize the profitability of the site that you're in, you have to consider the longevity of that population that is there. The more stable, the more positive that population is, the better off you are. Where do you want to keep practicing for a long time? Now, again, maybe it's my age, maybe it's my kids, whatever, but wanting to be in the place that you practice for a long time helps you recover the profitability of your practice. And I want you to think in the long term, not in the short term. Inflation is going to work against the short-term investment. However, if you're a wise person, you'll consider the long game for making a place profitable for your practice. Now, this is not something you can wave a wand and say, oh, well, here are the good places and the bad places throughout the United States in terms of longevity. It is an extremely personal choice. What makes it good for you may not make it good for another person. So you want to keep practicing for a long time, you have to choose a place that is true. Legacy practices are increasing in value, which means if you get into an office and you're there for a long period of time, even as a management partner, not as a clinician, perhaps, you are going to be in a better position when it comes to the value of that practice. Now, remember, you're going to sell the practice or you're going to sell your interest in that practice, and that is how you're going to become filthy, stinking rich. If you don't do that, you won't. I want to thank all of you for watching us. Oh, and by the way, I should say, if you would like to visit us at drdemographics.com, we have different versions of demographic research that we've got, facts that you may want to keep in mind. I am a believer that the more we share about what's happening demographically, the better off everybody is. So if you've got a question, if you've got something you would like to know, something that is going to help you, give us a call or write to me. I'll be happy to answer it in these podcasts and webinars. But order our reports. I'm going to give you the most up-to-date and sometimes troubling, but most of the time factual. That's what you need are the facts. And the implications of what the context of demographics and psychographic are. So thank you so much for watching. I look forward to helping you in the future. And please take care.